While this technique I'm going to show you for lay people to minimize trail erosion can be used on any trail anywhere, any kind of hiking trail. This will be a desert hiking trail on 124th Street north of Shea Boulevard in North Scottsdale. It's the Lost Dog Wash Trail. That's where we'll go. It's a little after 4 on October 19th, and that's a early afternoon, winter afternoon. I've come some distance in on that trail to start, because what I want to start with is I want to talk to you about what happens when you have what you see ahead of me here, a rounded smooth slope draining across a trail that doesn't rise or fall. I'm going to walk down the trail a little bit and show you that essentially the trail is not rising or falling. It's pretty much what we would say following a contour. If the shoreline of a lake was on my left side, you could see I would be walking along it without rising or falling. And the slope near it is smooth, so what you get is sheet flow. Even in a heavy storm, what's coming off that hill is uniformly distributed sheet flow water, which is not very scouring. So look back at where I just came from, and looking ahead, you can see that I'm on that gentle trail. And you can see that essentially when water hits the trail, it just goes as a sheet flow across the trail and down onto the countryside. So it doesn't collect, it doesn't concentrate, it doesn't have the scouring effect, and you don't have an erosion problem. Two things that can cause the erosion is if you begin to concentrate the water on the uphill side. That's not happening here, but I'll show you some places. But wherever the trail begins to fall, like you now see the trail falling in front of me, what happens is the water that hits the trail, instead of going across the landscape, gets concentrated on the trail, and now you have concentrated flow. And what I want to do is show you where we're going to take the water off the trail. Okay, looking back uphill, that's not a great area. It's not so much of a watershed that's going to feed it, but nevertheless you can see that as this water reaches this point, now it leaves the trail. And here's where you're going to see that as it leaves the trail, you're going to see where what I've done is laid lots of rocks in the area that's otherwise subject to severe erosion because you've concentrated that flow of water. Here's a close look at the head of that. Just as you leave the trail, you can see where the gravel and the silt is beginning to fill in between the rocks that I've placed, but further down that hasn't happened yet because this is all new work, relatively new work. Everything I show you is done by me and me alone in only the last probably 2 months' time, just coming out here to play. So here I am down at the saguaro cactus, and now you can see as you begin to look up that work I've done. See the loose rock that I filled in that low gully, that little gully. In some cases those gullies were there already. In some cases people have begun to dig them without dealing with erosion, and the rocks take care of the problem. I've walked back out past that smooth trail to the starting point of the video, and now I'm going to walk out. I'm going to head out the trails that I came in. Notice that even this next stretch is relatively flat, so there's not really an erosion problem, as the water even comes off a relatively steep but a smooth hill that delivers sheet flow and crosses the trail. So there's not erosion problems in here. Okay, I've stepped ahead of the trail. I've got a relatively smooth, steep but smooth slope that's feeding the trail, but now the trail takes a turn, and now it's going to pick up downhill speed, and with the downhill speed there's going to be a place to drain water right away, and that's where I did more rock work. So let's go take a closer look at it. Now, this does not have that big of a watershed. There's not much of an area upstream that's feeding it. So in fact, you don't see a lot of silt filling in the rocks. It's going to take a long time for that to happen. You'll see differently at other locations. It's just beginning to happen at the high end. Okay, I've come some distance out towards the city on the trail. This part of the trail is descending. It's picking up quite a bit of flow from the right that you can't see because I'm kind of in the bottom of a wash. And right up ahead of me, what I want to show you is that there's a mound on the trail that's pushing water off the trail to the left. So there was a place where you can see I've done the rock work to handle the erosion from that water leaving the trail. Because I'm in a silty wash bottom, it has silted in quite well at the front edge. Not so much yet at the back, but you can see how in just a couple months it's silted in. Okay, I'm a little further out. There's an area that doesn't have that much flow But if you do notice, there is a flow that crosses the trail and goes that way. So all I've really done is just slowed that water down a little bit at the edge of the trail to kind of protect the trail and minimize erosion. It's not a very serious place. You can almost have not done the work. Relatively flat country, but a little bit flowing across the trail and just a little bit to slow it down. Here's a little wash crossing the trail. I don't know if you can see that. See that area as the water comes past the barrel cactus and crosses the trail rather gently. All I did is here again on the low side. Unfortunately, the rocks are in the shadow. You can't see them that well, but just slowed down that flow where I could see erosion was beginning. This is gentle country, so you're going to see that I don't need to do much work. That's new, a little bit of silt on the high side. It'll work quite well. 10 feet further down the same trail, you can see this is going to need a little more work, and so it's got bigger rocks at the low end, but I think that'll do a lot to minimize the erosion of this cross flow. Again, I'm not in heavy territory yet. I got some more significant stuff to show you coming up. 50 yards further down the trail's begun to fall, and here's a mound in the trail right in front of me that's pushing the water into the side cut. The side cut has had very recent work by me. It's only silted in at the high end, and I think this will last a long time, but at least it will stabilize and protect that slope from erosion as that water leaves the trail. Let me mention that my source of the rocks I put in the cuts especially come from on and along the trail where people could trip on them, or from the nearby landscape where I do not see that they are helping to slow down any erosion. So I use rocks that I don't think are causing erosion or for safety issues along the trail to fill in for erosion purposes. And obviously I start with big rocks and try to fit them pretty well, almost like a brick fit. You can see it there. There in the distance is where I took the last video showing you the rock work. I've now come down that stretch. There's a gentle slope on the upstream side, and even though the trail is falling, the water hasn't concentrated. It's mostly leaving the trail, but ahead of me it's doing the reverse. Now I've got a steeper slope on the upstream side, and the trail is now draining so much water so forcefully you can see a gully beginning to cut and do erosion down the heart of the trail. So I was just up there a little ways, not as far as that saguaro, talking about the trail. It still continues very forcefully, and right here, right at my feet, the water is pretty much pushed off the trail into this little side cut. And this is going to take a minute to look at this. You can see that the water has silted in heavily with rocks and gravel at the upper rocks, and even gone clear down the entire thing. I filled this in early on. It's very much doing its work. Here's another view of that water coming down that trail and entering that rock thing I just described. You can see how I designed the rock entrance to take all the water and make sure it safely makes the turn before it heads down the slope. It's hard to see, but it splits on both sides of that creosote bush. Right back where you see that barrel cactus along the right side of the trail is where I just was. You can almost see the rocks. Now the water drains further down. It's still got flow and force. It's at this point now, there's another berm that pushes the water off the trail into another area of rocks that I've done. I'm going to take a closer look at them, but let's just stand back and see it. I don't know if you can see, but the silt and gravel from the heavy rains have already filled in 3/4 of the way down. And I'm going to squat down close to the trail height so you can see what the water sees. The water's coming along. It's still the low place. It's still going to leave the trail here, but to do so it has to bubble over those rocks, slow its flow down, and then get spread out at the low end so that hopefully it disperses without erosion. Showing you the only tool you need for this, I happen to favor these soft leather gloves. They give me a little bit of protection, I guess, against scorpions and such, although I've yet to see one in all this rock work. But essentially they protect my skin from the rocks. It's the only tool you need. Whoever's doing it. Cub Scouts, adults, whoever. Well, now I'm in the shadow of this big hill on the other side of the main wash over there, so my shadow pattern is going to change. You're probably going to be able to see the pictures better. This is just flat sheet flow across the wash, and just for the fun of it, I've lined some rocks along the trail. They're almost not necessary, but you see the work. Okay, I went through quite a bit of flat area. Right just ahead of me there, you can see the trail I'm looking back up, is beginning to fall, and as it falls it's beginning to erode badly. Here it is eroding in the middle of the trail, and then right around the corner here, right by that where you see kind of a log and then the creek in the background, I'm going to go over there and take a closer look, because that's where there's some work done. Lost Dog Wash comes in close, and the steep bank is right in front of me, and that trail part I was just showing you is right here. So this is where the water leaves the trail. I don't know if you can see how much work I did. There's quite a bit of silting that starts at the high end, which is good. It's already silted in among these rocks. I did use a fair amount of lumber and stuff that was there, and then some bigger boulders at the lower end. And so I believe I've done a good job of slowing what would otherwise be some pretty fast water moving through here. I was just up there where that little white sign is. From that point forward, the trail drains down to here, but once again a berm at my feet pushes water off the trail, and now you can see where I put the rocks in that are slowing the erosion. Notice how the rocks are silted at the high end and not yet at the low end, but that's preventing erosion. One of the things that happens as you slow the flow of the water, you put more water in that ground, which means the nearby plants like this Palo Verde tree is going to get more water over its life, because we're slowing more water in its drip ring. And also you can see how that water goes on past it underneath the tree.